Item D, adopt a resolution approving amendments to the City of San Bruno 2010-11 operating budget. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. At the last City Council meeting, the council adopted the fiscal year 10-11 budget, and as part of your discussion related to budget approval, City Council made one specific request, and that was that staff further evaluate and provide a recommendation to the council at tonight's meeting on options for funding restoration of one of the many items that was proposed and is now approved for elimination in our current year's budget as a deficit reduction strategy. I won't go through in detail tonight the number of items that received attention and were eliminated in this budget, simply to summarize that they are in the amount of nearly $1 million in total and include just over 8.5 full-time positions, as well as reduction to a wide variety of line items affecting virtually every area of the city's service and every department. Specifically, the City Council asked that we evaluate options for restoring a portion of the part-time hours at the library that were proposed for elimination, and more specifically that we evaluate that request in the context of assuring that the library would then not need to close on Fridays. As the City Council is aware, the budget currently proposes elimination of $70,000, or roughly 50% of the previous year's allocation to part-time hourly salaries for staff in the library. I would only mention for the council's information that the amount that's in the prior year 9-10 budget is already substantially reduced from years prior to that period of time. So there's been a successive, almost annual over the past several years, elimination of funding for part-time hours in the library. So at this point, we move to reduce the remaining amount by 50% as one of the many budget reduction strategies. By restoring approximately $22,000 of that $70,000 amount, staff can avoid, or the city can avoid, reduction in library hours where the library is open and available to the public. Currently, the library is open from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday and 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Monday through Thursday. The library is open from when to when on Saturday? 9 to 5? 10 to 5 on Saturday. The budget proposal is to eliminate 12 hours of operation. That includes opening an hour later and closing an hour earlier on Monday through Thursday as well, so for a total of 8 hours, and eliminating the 4 remaining hours of operation on Fridays. As I indicated, the City Council asked that we come back to you with options that would eliminate the need to close on Friday, that would essentially restore $22,000 of funding for part-time hourly staff. The report that you have in front of you tonight evaluates or gives you some perspective about a number of different options that staff considered. I'll focus on the recommendation, and that is that this amount could be funded via a restricted fund that the city has generated, has built up over the past many years. We receive on an annual basis approximately $60,000, or at least that's the current annual receipts, in 2 pots of money from the State Library Fund. In general terms, those funds are derived and are reimbursed to the city in recognition of services that the city provides through its library on a regional or statewide basis, in particular the interlibrary loan program, whereby an individual residing somewhere elsewhere, literally in the state, can request a book, and if that book or that material is available at the San Bruno Library and can be checked out there, that it would be essentially loaned to the individual's local library, and they're then checked out to that individual. So there is a real coordination and cooperation that occurs not just regionally through the Peninsula Library System, but on a statewide basis. A portion of the costs for participating in that type of program is reimbursed to the city through the interlibrary loan program. And those amounts have in prior years accrued to the development of a state library fund that is on deposit with the city. Those are city resources. They are generally restricted by council policy to library uses. And it was originally, I think, the city council's intent that that fund would provide seed money for a new library. I think that the intent goes back a number of years. In fact, we have generated or had generated a relatively substantial balance in the $700,000 to $800,000 range. That fund has been drawn on in the recent past for limited improvements to maintain the serviceability of a now very aged library. And as the City Council is, I think, painfully aware, our efforts to identify funding for a new library have not yet been successful. And in fact, the opportunity to replace the library in total remains a situation that is not in the foreseeable future. The amount that the city receives from the State Library Fund program in recent years, in the past approximate 4 years, has in fact not been deposited to that fund, but has been offsetting the general fund costs of operating the library. In the current year, we are using $115,000 from that fund, a portion of which will be received in new revenue this year, but a portion which is simply drawing down the balance of that fund. The proposal tonight is to take an additional $22,000 out of that fund to restore the operating hours on Friday via the additional contribution to part-time hourly staff salaries. I think, as my presentation has probably clarified, this is an option that remains viable for the City Council to consider for a limited period of time. I think library staff will continue to advocate for reservation of some of those funds to be available to provide the type of improvements that are now in process to make the mezzanine floor both more accessible as well as more inviting to library patrons, and therefore maintain and extend the service life of the library facility itself. Very briefly, other options that staff considered related specifically to the library, and one that I want to comment on in particular is, okay, so maybe you could just look at closing the library at different 4 hours, maintain the library open on Fridays, but maybe close an additional third hour of the day on Monday through Thursday, and thereby get to the same number of hours. In consultation with library staff, that was something that they felt very strongly was not immediately workable, in that you reach a critical point in staffing any operation, and in particular, I think we've reached that with the library, where it's not just a matter of you can cut back the hours and still stretch the rubber band as far as we would like to do that. That additional day really does present a need for the flexibility that the part-time staff availability provides, and that's the reason that we are recommending to you, number one, that it requires the additional funding if you want the library open on Friday, and that, again, my recommendation is that you use the library fund as opposed to going to other resources, trying to juggle around other funds, or as I know the council is would not have. I anticipated you wouldn't want me coming back and saying you could use the reserve, so I didn't do that. My recommendation that the alternatives that we explored are further outlined in the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city manager?
Just to clarify, 22,000 does not reduce it, keeps the 8 hours. Keeps the 8 hours per week.
Correct.
No.
8 hours. There would be an addition. There would be a reduction of 8 hours per week instead of 12 hours per week.
Oh, so
It
you're still
only-
reducing. You're still reducing the 4 days, Monday
Correct.
through Thursday,
Correct.
but keeping open all day, the 4 hours.
All it does
on
is
Friday.
allow the
Preserves
library
Friday.
to remain open on Fridays.
We still have a $50,000
Correct.
reduction.
Library would
Oh,
still
so
be
70,000 would restore everything.
correct.
Michael? Chair. If I remember correctly from the report, you did mention possibly reducing staff during portions of when the library is open, but that might have some negative impacts. And I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on if, say, one less person was working on a shift, what the actual impact, I mean, is there any safety concerns, or would it be maybe just longer waits at the counter?
Yeah, I didn't actually address that in detail in the report, and I actually, John, if you could come to the podium and maybe address this in a little more detail. My understanding is that we currently staff the library with a minimum of 4 persons. Honestly, what I would say, given the size and the utilization of the facility, the numbers of persons, and just from a safety perspective, cutting that, it gives me a great deal of concern. It's a very busy, very active library. Not only do we want to be able to, if you're going to open the doors, I think you need to be able to provide the service that people who come to a library expect. Qualified reference, professional, somebody that can assist you. It's not just a matter of people can come in and get books and check them out. There's really a great deal more to what goes on in a library. So I would say there's 2 things. One is to be able to provide at least a minimal level of regular service, and secondly, safety considerations.
And just to add, your question actually is very relevant. Your question already has been answered. We have already taken that into consideration. So regardless of whether the hours are there or not, we already have to reduce by 1 person hour on the desk, primarily between the hours of 2 and 5, which are typically busier. We usually had an additional person on. That already had to be taken off the table as well. So that's already in the mix in this conversation. So,
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Just through the chair, I appreciate, yes, sure, I would not have supported it if it were reserves. I understand this doesn't solve the problem. It gets us through this budget cycle. We could still have the same situation come forward again. But this is I think the resource that has been identified is what it's supposed to be used for, is library and services. And I think this is a service that our community needs in these challenging times. And I would agree that I think if we're only having 4 at that point, that's very minimal staffing. Obviously, people do get ill, there are vacations and other issues that arise. And I think if we are going to open the doors, we have to have a full complement of staff that will be able to not only maintain the safety of the facility and the risk factors, but also be able to provide the service to the community.
Any more discussion or action?
Through the chair. First of all, I do appreciate all the effort it took to find the money. I know it's not easy, and to do the analysis to say where the staff should go and shouldn't go. I really hope that the public appreciates the enormity of what 4 people do in the library. There's 900 people in and out of that library all day long, every single day. The people who are there answer. I've stood there and watched. They answer questions. They herd children in and out. They help people at the computers. They find things for people. There is a self-checkout station that if you have your books, but it's like the self-checkout at the grocery store. I mean, you stand there and, every third person, you need assistance. You've all done it. I've done it. It's not seamless as much as we would like it to be. If you stand there and look behind the desk at all those books that have to be reshelved and looked at and repaired every single day, $22,000 is a small price to pay to keep the library open for people who have no other resources. I realize they still take the furlough, but this is 44 days that people will now be able to use the library. So I'd love to introduce the resolution to approve of this and the rest of the budget.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.